You're listening to the weekly Parsha Podcast with Ari Goldwag, recorded with Hashem's never-ending assistance in Matos-Masei, Israel, 5784, 2024. This week's Parsha is Parshas Matos-Masei, and I'd like to share with you two midrashim that are next to each other. I'm actually going to read them out of order, but they say two different things about the same story that seem to be the opposite ideas, but they teach us an essential lesson that has to do very much with our lives and our proper approach to the blessings that Hashem gives us and places in our lives. Torah tells us that the tribes of Reuven and Gad and half of the tribe of Manasseh, they had a lot of livestock, they had a lot of animals, and on the eastern side of the Jordan River, they saw that there was a lot of space, a lot of grazing land for their animals, and they requested of Moshe that they be given, instead of going into the land of Israel, and be given a portion in Israel proper, on the western side of the Jordan River. They said, give us a portion over here on this side of the river, because that side was also supposed to be split amongst the 12 tribes, supposed to be split really evenly. Each one would have a portion there. But they said, give us that area because we have a lot of animals. Now, where did these animals come from? Where did they get all of this wealth? And there's like kind of a dichotomy here, because on one hand, they agreed to come into the land of Israel. They agreed to fight alongside their brothers. They didn't step back from their responsibility, but at the same time, they showed that it was more important to them to have a place and an expression for their wealth than to have a piece of Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. So, you know me, you know how I talk. It's important to remember that Eretz Yisrael is clearly the place for Am Yisrael. It's clearly the place where we belong. And saying Parnasa, livelihood, is more important than living in the land of Israel is problematic. That's what we see from this Parsha. I'm not going to get so much into that, but it's good to know that going in, it's important to remind ourselves Eretz Yisrael is the ideal. Living in the land of Israel is where every single Jew belongs. This is where we fulfill our potential. This is where we can plant. Behind me, you can see, if you look carefully behind the plumeria, there's grapevine, which I showed you a bunch of weeks back. But, planting in Eretz Yisrael, just planting a tree, is a mitzvah of Yishuv Haaretz, of inhabiting the land of Israel. There's so many opportunities for serving God in everything. But we're going to speak more about that actual aspect of serving God in everything in the second half of what we're going to say. But let's read the first half. The Medrash tells us, where did they get all this wealth? Which caused them to ask to have a portion on the eastern side of the Jordan River, which caused them to ultimately be the first of the tribes to be exiled. This is what the pasuk says in Tehillim, in Psalms. It says this in chapter 75, verses 7 and 8. That, you're not going to... Where does the wealth come from? Where does success come from? It's not if you go out and you find it in the west, far this way, that way. It's not if you go out to the hilly areas, the places where the wilderness. God judges everybody. He lowers the one who needs to be lowered, and he raises up the one who needs to be raised. So now I translated the word Velemi Midbar Harim, and it's not in the wilderness and the mountainous areas. The word Harim generally means a mountain. But we're going to see in this medrash that it doesn't always mean that. In this context, it actually means something different. Right? Let's see. Person thinks that there's, predetermined paths, normal hishtadlus that we do, normal efforts that we put in order to make our livelihood. If you go to a certain place, you're involved in a certain conference, you speak to the right people, that's how you make your money. The way the Medrash says it is, it's not the efforts that a person puts into his merchandise and goes from east to west, and he goes to that place to buy the merchandise, and then he goes to China, and he has his connections there, and he works with other people, and it seems like that's what makes you successful, right? Pasuk is saying that's not it. Because the Medrash tells us something which is, wakes us up a little bit to the reality. We think that if we do certain things, If we go on our boats, we fly to certain areas, we go on our planes, etc., flying here, flying there in order to succeed in business. So we think that that's what's going to make us successful. But you could do all that, and you cannot end up being very rich. Right? A person can study many years and become a professional, and as my Rosh Hashiva, Rabbi Peres Zechariah used to say, you can become a doctor, but you could be a poor doctor. You could be somebody who doesn't make money per se. It doesn't have so much to do with your ishtadlus. It doesn't have to do with your efforts. So it's not about you. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu who decides. God Himself decides who will be lowered and who will be raised. Rabbi Abba says, in explaining the words wilderness and mountainous areas, generally speaking, the word harim means a mountain. It means a mountainous area or mountains. The word harim can also mean to be raised up. Right? A mountain is very high. So in this context, harim, it means don't think that if you go there, you're going to be raised up. All of the efforts that a person does, all of the natural, seemingly successful ways of doing business, reading all the magazine articles about all the different ways that people succeeded in their business, that's not what gives you success per se. Because what does God do in order to show that this is true? Sometimes it happens that a person might be even rich, succeeds, but Hashem takes away his possessions and gives it to somebody else. Somehow it ends up in somebody else's hands. That's the pasuk that says, God judges and decides, and it's based on meritocracy. Yes, depends on the person, it depends on his merits. This one he lifts, this one he lowers. That's why they're called nechasim. That's why they're called, what is the word nechasim? Which means possessions. Sometimes they're covered from one person and they appear to another person. It looks like you have, or somebody has, certain possessions, and then they end up in someone else's hands. Hashem does the things that need to be done for it to move. Sometimes money is called zuzim, because it moves. The word zuz, right? The zaben abba bitrei zuze, the goat that was bought with two zuzim. That's the kind of money. It's like $1. Why is it called dollars? It's called zuzim because it moves from one person to the next. Mamoin, another word for money. Mamoin, you think you're counting the money, but it's not. You don't know how much value it has to you. It's just points. It's just points on a screen. Mo'is. Another word for money is mo'is. Mala'es. You have it for the time being. And you can always darshan, you can always take the name of money and understand that it's not meant to remain by that person per se. It depends on Hashem's determination. And we're going to bring this back to the story with the Bnei Gad, Bnei Reuven. The Medrash underscores this with a pasuk that Chana says, Hashem meimis m'chai merish shel vayual. Hashem gives life, Hashem takes away life. Hashem brings a person down into the depths and He brings a person up. Hashem merish u'mashir. Hashem causes one person to inherit and become rich. Mashpilaf maramim. God brings down one person and brings up another person. It could be the same person. Ma'af maramim. What does it mean? Af maramim. Even He lifts up a person, but af shul maybe lazeh maramim eseh. Sometimes Hashem brings anger upon one, brings some kind of judgment upon one person in order to raise up another person. You could think about it in terms of a court case where the court awards a certain amount of money to somebody, takes the money away from one, gives it to the other person. So, Shalom Matrena Aches is Reb Shimon ben Chalafta. There was a particular woman who asked Reb Shimon ben Chalafta the following question: like, how long did it take for God to create the world? Took 6 days. God worked for 6 days. He rested on the 7th day. That's why we keep Shabbos, to give testimony to the fact that God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. Hashem created the world, let it run, so to speak. Everything's set up. What does he do now? What does God do? Is God bored? So Reb Shimon ben Chalafta said to her, what Hashem does now is he sits and he makes ladders. And he's moving the pieces around on the chutes and ladders board. He lifts up this one, lowers this one, moving around the wealth. That's why the verse says, God is a judge. He lifts up one, he lowers another. So now we're back to our story, to the story of the Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven. Where did they get their wealth from? You should know, when Hashem decided that the children of Reuven and Gad should become wealthy, he put us Midianim, Lifnei Israel. This is, I think, important for us to just understand generally about our times. We're in very interesting times. When you see wars going on, right? You look around and you say, what's going on? But we need to understand that this is from God. This is from Hashem, right? The Jewish people were instructed by Hashem to war against Midian because the Midianite people caused the Jewish people to sin, caused 24,000 Jews to be killed in a plague. Hashem said, it's time to take revenge against them. They were destroyed. The Midianite people were destroyed. But what happened? Hipilas Midianim Lifnei Yisrael. God caused the Midianite people the Jewish people were victorious over the Midianite people. And the money went, the wealth of the Midianite people went to the children of Gad and Reuven. How do you see this? Right? Right before this Parsha, which speaks about the Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven and their wealth, and they came to Moshe and asked for this land on the eastern side of the Jordan. So it says that the Jewish people went and they took much money from, they took all the spoils from the Midianite people. And immediately after that it says that they had a lot, that the Reuven and Gad had a lot of livestock. It's coming to teach you from placing these two concepts next to each other. That God lowered the Midianite people and raised up the Jewish people. We spoke about this actually in the Parsha Podcast, which I highly recommend seeing. We called it World War III and the Rise and Israel's Rise. Really worth listening to. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to raise up the Jewish people and bring about a new world order, sorry for using that term, he wants the Jewish people should be the leaders of the world in every area, especially spiritually. So Hashem creates wars. That's what Gog and Magog is about, right? So Hashem did that with the Midianim. That's why Hashem did this. We had a war with Midian, so that because Hashem had determined and decided that the Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven should get this money, that they should become wealthy, which is very interesting because it seems like a negative thing that they were wealthy and they wanted to have this piece of land on the eastern side of the Jordan. But we're going to see in the next piece in the Medrash, which is really the previous piece, we're going to see that it really depends on how a person decides to use their wealth. The fact that a person becomes wealthy initially is a gift from Hashem. It's decided in heaven that that person should become wealthy. Hashem will take away the money from one and give it to another. If Hashem decides that Ukraine is going to lose part of its territory to Russia, that's a decision that's made in heaven. If Russia is going to lose the war, that's a decision made in heaven. Gaza, the Hamas are going to attack people of Israel. The result will be that they'll be decimated, destroyed, their land destroyed. Lebanon, Iran, all these parties. We need to know that it's Hashem is playing the chessboard. Hashem is playing, Hashem has determined that this one, it's time for there to be a certain level of judgment, call it, or they've done wicked deeds. They're wicked people. Hashem has his cheshbonos. We don't understand exactly what's going on truly. We'll perhaps understand more after the fact. But we need to know that everything that's going on is part of Hashem's plan, and it's been determined in heaven that this one is supposed to be lowered, this one is supposed to be raised up. Okay? Important. But again, what do we do with that now? What happens after the war, after this huge war with Midian? The money goes to the Bnei Gad, Bnei Reuven. What happens after? Currently, let's talk about today. What happens, Mitzvah Hashem, Bezrat Hashem, when the Jewish people stand up and we defeat our enemies with God's help? Now, here we are. We prove to the world that we're powerful, that we can protect ourselves, and that we can vanquish our enemies. What happens now? What do we do with that power? How does it look with peace treaties with Saudi Arabia, like the day after? What does the day after look like? So that's what this medrash is teaching us. That we have to understand that there's, when there's a battle, and we win the battle, and we get the honor or the wealth, etc., what do we do with it next? And that's the next piece which I'd like to read to you. Says the Medrash in regards to the story of these wealthy people of the tribes of Reuven and Gad. The Medrash says that there were 3 gifts that were created in the world. If you get one of them, you've received all of the desired things of the world. If you have strength, if you have power, you have it all. We'll see what this means. If you merit to have wealth, you have it all. Oh, I skipped one. The first is, if you merit to have wisdom, intellect, understanding, you have it all. Masei, says the Medrash, when is this true? Interesting. When is it true that these are positive forces, whether it's wisdom, or whether it's wealth, or whether it's strength and power? If it comes and you recognize that it's a gift from heaven, and you understand that it comes it comes from the power of our spiritual guidance, our spiritual set of rules, which is the Torah. And there's another version of this. It comes from Hashem's power. Right? And the Meforshim here bring that Ezehu Ashir, Hasameach Bechelko, who is the rich person, the person who's happy with his lot? Actually, it says, it says in the Meforshim that if you use your wealth, it's a different concept than Hasameach Bechelko, the one who's happy with his lot. If you use your wealth, you don't think that the wealth is for you, but you share your wealth. What do you use your wisdom for? Is it about self-aggrandizement? Is it about me becoming more popular, more famous, more successful? Or is it about, how can I use this to serve Hashem, to serve God, to facilitate others serving Hashem better? How can I use my wealth, my wisdom, my power for others? Or here, Ezu Gibor HaKovish is Yitzray. Who is the mighty one, the one who overcomes his inclination? Right? That's real power. Power over self. That's the true power. If I use it, well, what am I using it for? Am I using it for selfish means? Am I using my wisdom, my wealth, and my power for personal gain? Or am I using it for the greater good? Am I using it for godliness, for spirituality? Am I using it to become connected to Hashem myself and to facilitate others' connection to Hashem? So when I recognize that it's a gift from Hashem, and I understand that it's coming mikoch HaTorah, it's to be used in my service of God, as is expressed in the Torah, then it's good. Then it's good. But you should know that if it's used for selfish means, for the natural things that human beings use it for, to feel a sense of self-assuredness, I'm rich, I have everything, I have my needs taken care of, I'm powerful, I can protect myself, I can stand up in the world. If that's the language that is being used, if that's the thinking, if it's about myself and self-perpetuation, and it doesn't go back to the roots. It doesn't go back to, I need to be able to be powerful to protect myself so I can serve Hashem, so I can learn His Torah, so I can be a successful nation, a Jewish nation with a strong Jewish identity and practice. Then we're talking. What do we need the wealth for? What do we need the strength for? King Solomon says, "Shavti v'roi tachas hashemesh ki lo lekal ma'meretz v'lo legiborim ha'milchama." I sat and I saw. This is in Koheles, in Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 11. I sat and I saw under the sun in the world that those who are quick, those who are light-footed, they don't win the race. Those who are strong, they don't win the war. Those who are wise are not per se the ones who have livelihood. Those who are very intuitive don't necessarily get rich. When a person is overly involved in self, when a person thinks that they have all the answers and they're only concerned about numero uno, number one, themselves, it can easily fall. It can easily fall. Hashem lowers, Hashem raises up. Jeremiah says, chapter 9, verse 22-23, this is what Hashem says, the wise person shouldn't praise himself about his wisdom. These three aspects, wisdom, strength. Don't praise yourself about your strength. Don't brag. Don't brag. The Pasuk says, this is what you should praise yourself about. The fact that you have used your wisdom to know me, Hashem says. You've used your wealth in order to promote positive Jewish, religious, Orthodox practice. And that's what you should praise yourself about. That's what you use your wealth for. That's what you use your wisdom for. That's what you use your strength for. To become a greater person in your relationship with God. The Medrash says when you don't recognize that it comes from Hashem and you don't direct it back to its source, they can be lost. These gifts can disappear. They can be lost. He gives a number of examples, and I'm not going to read every example, but I'm going to bring it back. That's what you see by the children of the tribes of Gad and Reuven. They were wealthy. They had lots of money. They had lots of livestock. But they made their parnasa, their money, more important than anything else. They said, look, I need to live over here. I'm not going to go into the land of Israel. I'm not going to... It's harder in Israel to make a livelihood. It's harder. That's what they said. And so that was a misdirection, because Israel is the place of the ultimate connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How could you not live in Israel? How could you live in Chutz La'aretz? How could you stay there? How can you stay in the place of disconnection from Hashem because of your livelihood, because of your money, because of every other excuse? They lived outside of Israel because of their parnas, their livelihood. What was the result? The result was that they ended up in exile before everyone else. The first group of people to go into exile was this group, Reuven, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh. Because they separated themselves from their brothers in Israel because of their livelihood. So it's very interesting. So the result, what comes out of this, is that the main issue here is, what is your spiritual approach? What is your approach to having wealth, to having wisdom, to having strength? What do you do with it? Do you recognize that it's from Hashem and it's meant for you to use in your spiritual pursuits? Well, one way to tell is, what do you say about Eretz Yisrael? What do you say about Israel? Do you not come into Israel because of a worry about Parnasa? Do you not realize and recognize that Parnasa is from Hashem? If you're meant to have it, you're going to have it, no matter where you are. And Eretz Yisrael is a place of Hashgacha Pratis, even more so than in Chutz La'aretz. Right? Do you recognize that? But I know I'm harping on the Israel issue, but let's bring it to just a simple, straightforward point, which is for all of us to understand and relate to, and that is recognizing that the wealth, the power, the wisdom that I have is from God. And it's meant to be used in my service of God. It's meant to be used and recognized, bring it back to the source. How can I maximize my spiritual potential with this? And it's indicated by, as the Medrash says, it's indicated by the fact that the Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, they didn't go into the land of Israel. That's indicative of the fact that there was something missing in their understanding of what the wealth was for. So even though Hashem had given them the wealth, taking it away from Midian, how is it used? When we, Bezrat Hashem, with Hashem's help, succeed and we vanquish our enemies, what will we do then next? The next step is Beis HaMikdash. That's got to be the next step. We got to build it. We're waiting for the Beis HaMikdash to come down from heaven, but I got to tell you something. The Pashtus is, we're supposed to build the Beis HaMikdash. We have an obligation, Vasili Mikdash. We have an obligation to build it. And the Jewish people obviously have to be spiritually ready for that. But that's the next step. That's the next stage. After we win, Bezrat Hashem, the post-war plan is to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. I want to bless you and ask you to bless me. Hashem should help us. That we should be able to understand where it comes from. Whatever talents, whatever gifts that we have, we must understand. Hashem should help us understand that they are from Him. Hashem should help us to be able to redirect, to make sure that the direction of what we're doing, of how we utilize our gifts, should be brought back to the source. Hashem should help us to be able to get to the land of Israel, to be able to show ourselves and God that this is the place that our spiritual growth, which is best accomplished in Israel, is the thing that's most important to us. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful Shabbos.
This podcast was made possible through the gracious donations of listeners like you. For more podcasts like this, please visit www.arigoldwag.com or search on iTunes Ari Goldwag.